You feel the cold marble beneath you. The air is thick with perfume and power, hundreds of Rome's most elite citizens watching your every move. You are the emperor. You command legions from Britannia to Egypt. One word from your lips can execute a senator or enrich a province. But right now, in this moment, you cannot control the one thing that matters: your own body. The pressure builds inside you, crushing, tearing, unbearable. You grip the armrests of your throne, knuckles white, fighting against something that should be simple, natural, invisible. But nothing about your body has ever been simple. And in the next 60 seconds, everything you've built, every victory you've won, every mockery you've survived, all of it will be erased by what's about to happen. Before we descend into that throne room, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. It genuinely amazes me that a story from 2,000 years ago can connect us across continents, time zones, and languages. The human fascination with power and vulnerability never fades. October 54 AD, the Palatine Hill, heart of imperial Rome. In a marble hall designed to project absolute authority, Emperor Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus presides over a formal court session. He is 63 years old. He has reigned for 13 years, longer than anyone expected, when the Praetorian Guard pulled him from behind a curtain and declared him emperor after Caligula's assassination. He conquered Britannia, something even Julius Caesar couldn't permanently achieve. He built aqueducts that still carry water today. He reformed laws, expanded citizenship, modernized the bureaucracy. But the hundreds of nobles gathered before him remember something else. The way he limps across the floor, dragging his left leg. The way his head shakes when he speaks. The drool that constantly escapes the corner of his mouth. They remember that his own mother called him a monster, not finished by nature. They remember every time he wet himself during Senate meetings, unable to control his failing bladder. Today, Claudius is dying. He doesn't know it yet, Tor. Perhaps he does, and he's simply performing the role one last time, maintaining the illusion of control even as his body wages its final rebellion. The session begins normally enough. Petitioners approach. Legal matters are discussed. Administrative decrees are announced. Standard imperial business. But those seated closest to the throne notice something wrong. The emperor's face is ashen, slicked with sweat despite the cool marble interior. His breathing comes in short, shallow gasps. His hands grip the throne's armrests with an intensity that suggests he's holding on not just for dignity, but for consciousness itself. His lower abdomen is visibly distended beneath his toga, swollen like a wineskin stretched beyond capacity. For Claudius, this is not new. The pain has been building for hours, perhaps days. His bladder, already damaged by years of chronic retention and infection, has filled far beyond its natural limits. Every minute that passes adds more urine to an organ already stretched to the breaking point. Ancient physicians have tried everything. Bronze catheters forced through his urethra, herbal diuretics that only make things worse, bloodletting that leaves him weak and anemic. Nothing works. The underlying problem, whether enlarged prostate, bladder stones, or neurological damage, remains beyond their ability to treat. What makes this particular session different is timing. What makes it unforgettable is visibility. Because what happens next doesn't occur in Claudius's private chambers where it can be hidden, managed and cleaned up by slaves who will never speak of it. It happens here. In front of senators, generals, administrators, and aristocrats, the very people who have spent decades questioning his right to rule based on his physical inadequacy. Approximately 1 hour into the session, something inside Claudius changes. His entire body goes rigid. His eyes widen, not with pain exactly, but with recognition. The terrible understanding of someone who realizes that what they feared most is now inevitable. Witnesses would later describe a moment of absolute silence, as if even the ambient noise of breathing and shifting fabric stopped. Time seemed to suspend. Inside his body, the catastrophe unfolds. His bladder wall, stretched thinner than parchment. riddled with weak spots from years of chronic infection and trauma, reaches its ultimate limit. The pressure inside, far exceeding what human tissue can withstand, finds the weakest point, and the bladder tears open. Not a small perforation that might heal or leak slowly. A complete rupture. The organ literally explodes from internal pressure, splitting open like fabric ripped under tension. In an instant, everything contained in that distended bladder urine, blood, pus from untreated infections floods into Claudius's abdominal cavity. The medical term is intraperitoneal rupture, and it is among the most agonizing emergencies the human body can experience. The peritoneum, the sensitive membrane lining the abdominal cavity, is suddenly bathed in caustic fluid. The pain is immediate, absolute, and unlike anything Claudius has experienced even in a lifetime marked by physical suffering. The sound that emerges from the emperor is not quite human. Something between a scream and a groan, a noise of pure animal agony that echoes off marble walls, designed to carry the authoritative pronouncements of power. His hands release the throne and clutch at his abdomen. He tries to stand, some instinct toward maintaining dignity, or perhaps seeking escape from the pain, but his legs won't support him. He collapses forward, pitching from the throne onto the cold marble floor. The impact of his fall silences the room again. Then chaos. Nobles surge forward. Others recoil. Slaves run for help. Someone shouts for physicians, but everyone close enough can see what's happening. The emperor's toga is darkening with spreading wetness. The smell hits them in waves, urine, yes, but also something fouler. The metallic scent of internal bleeding, the rot of infection. Claudius lies on marble stained with his own waste, curled into a fetal position, hands pressed against an abdomen that has become rigid as wood. His face cycles through colors, purple from oxygen deprivation as pain makes it impossible to breathe properly. Then gray-white as shock sets in. Foam appears at his mouth, tinged pink with blood. His legs kick spasmodically against the floor, not purposeful movement, but the body's involuntary response to catastrophic trauma. This is the obliteration of dignitas, that untranslatable Roman concept encompassing dignity, authority, prestige, and reputation. Everything an emperor is supposed to be. In Roman culture, you could lose your life with honor. Soldiers died well on battlefields. Even assassination could be dignified if you faced the blade without flinching. But this, lying in your own filth, your body completely out of control, reduced from supreme ruler to suffering animal while hundreds of Rome's elite watch. This is annihilation of everything that makes power meaningful. The physicians who finally arrive are confronted with a medical situation they have no framework to address. One attempts catheterization, not understanding that draining the bladder through the urethra is now pointless, since the bladder itself no longer exists as a functional container. He pushes a bronze tube through Claudius's urethra, causing fresh agony while accomplishing nothing. Another physician opens a vein in the emperor's arm for bloodletting, operating under humoral theory that removing blood will restore balance. Instead, it only accelerates his decline as he's already losing blood internally. They carry him to his private chambers, leaving a wet trail through the palace corridors. Every slave, every courtier they pass will carry this image forever, the emperor of Rome being transported like a broken thing, his toga soaked through, his body still convulsing. In his chambers, the full horror becomes visible. When they remove his toga, his abdomen is grotesquely swollen, hard as a drum from the fluid accumulating inside. Pressing on it causes him to scream. His skin is cold and clammy, even as fever begins to rage. The first sign of peritonitis, as bacteria from urine and bladder infection colonize his abdominal cavity. His pulse races weak and thready. His breathing becomes labored as fluid accumulates in his lungs. What kills you from a ruptured bladder is not the rupture itself, but what follows: peritonitis and sepsis. The bacteria multiply exponentially in the warm, nutrient-rich environment of the abdominal cavity. Your body launches a massive inflammatory response, flooding the bloodstream with immune mediators that cause blood vessels to dilate and leak fluid. Blood pressure plummets. Organs begin to fail. The kidneys shut down, unable to filter toxins. The heart struggles to pump against collapsing blood pressure. The lungs fill with fluid, making each breath a desperate labor. Claudius remains conscious for much of this, drifting in and out of delirium, but aware enough to experience the progression of his own death. Ancient sources suggest he sometimes tried to speak, but his lifelong stutter, combined with pain and shock, made his words unintelligible. Perhaps he was calling for help, perhaps apologizing, perhaps simply crying out in agony. The question that has echoed through to millennia: was he poisoned? Multiple ancient historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, claim his wife Agrippina fed him poisoned mushrooms the night before. According to their accounts, the poison began its work, weakening him and precipitating the final bladder crisis. Agrippina had clear motive. Eliminating Claudius would place her son Nero on the throne, making her the power behind the empire. Modern historians debate this endlessly. Some accept the poison theory, seeing Agrippina as calculating enough to commit murder. Others argue that ancient historians routinely blamed powerful women for deaths that had natural causes. The truth may be both. Perhaps Agrippina did poison him, but his death resulted from the collision of poison and pre-existing catastrophic bladder disease. The poison didn't directly kill him, the bladder rupture did, but it may have accelerated an inevitable outcome. What we know with certainty: Claudius spent approximately 12 hours dying from the moment of rupture to his final breath. 12 hours of ascending agony as infection spread through his body. 12 hours, during which attendants changed blood-soaked bedding, wiped sweat from his face, and waited for the inevitable. 12 hours, during which Agrippina was already securing Nero's succession, controlling information flow, positioning allies, and preparing announcements. In the early hours of October 13, 54 AD, the emperor's struggle ended. His kidneys had failed. His lungs were drowning. His heart finally stopped. The attendants who witnessed his final moments described labored breathing that simply ceased, the tension leaving his face for the first time in days. The announcement was delayed for hours. Agrippina needed time to ensure Nero's smooth accession. When news finally spread through Rome, reactions splintered. Some mourned a capable administrator dealt a cruel fate. Others felt relief that the crippled fool could finally be replaced by young, handsome Nero. Still others whispered that he deserved a divine punishment for marrying Agrippina, for his perceived weakness, for being what he was. But everyone, supporters and detractors alike, was shaken by how he died. Even in a culture saturated with public executions and gladiatorial death, the image of an emperor dying in his own waste represented something profoundly disturbing. It violated the fundamental Roman belief that power should be accompanied by physical dignity and control. The funeral, conducted with full imperial honors, became an exercise in collective amnesia. Senators delivered eulogies, praising his conquest of Britannia, his legal reforms, his building projects, carefully omitting any mention of October 13th. Nero gave a speech written by Seneca honoring his adoptive father. Claudius was deified, declared a god by Senate decree, and temples were erected to Divus Claudius. Yet even as official Rome mourned, Seneca himself authored the Apocolosynthesis, the pumpkinification, a savage satire mocking Claudius's deification and suggesting he was turned into a pumpkin rather than a god. The work referenced his disabilities, his speech impediment, his humiliating death. The mockery that plagued him in life would continue forever. History's assessment of Claudius has evolved across centuries. Ancient writers under Nero and his successors emphasized his weakness and foolishness. Medieval chroniclers saw his death as proof of bodily corruption and worldly vanity. Modern historians, examining his actual policies and achievements, recognize him as competent and often innovative, expanding the empire, improving infrastructure, reforming law with intelligence and compassion. But no assessment, ancient or modern, can separate Claudius from how he died. The accomplished administrator who modernized Rome and the man whose bladder exploded in front of his court, these are not two different people. They are the same person, and both realities are true simultaneously. What remains most haunting is the human dimension. Imagine living for decades with the knowledge that your body might betray you publicly at any moment. Imagine the anxiety before every Senate session, every public ceremony, the fear of wetting yourself, of losing control, of confirming every cruel thing said about your inadequacy. Imagine achieving genuine accomplishments, conquering Britannia, building aqueducts that will serve Rome for centuries, still being remembered primarily for drooling on yourself. Claudius's disability would have been challenging in any era, but in Rome, where physical perfection was tied to moral worth, where the body was seen as reflecting the soul, his limitations became evidence of unworthiness no achievement could overcome. He proved that a disabled person could govern effectively, make wise decisions, and lead successfully. But his death reaffirmed Roman prejudices, that disabled bodies were fundamentally flawed, undignified, unsuitable for power. The medical dimension adds another layer. Today, a man with Claudius's symptoms would undergo imaging, receive diagnosis, and get treatment medication for enlarged prostate, lithotripsy for stones, surgical intervention if needed. Bladder rupture, if it somehow occurred despite modern treatment, could be surgically repaired with antibiotics preventing infection. The mortality rate for properly treated bladder rupture in a modern hospital is relatively low. But in 54 AD, Claudius was doomed. Roman physicians, despite their sophistication, lacked diagnostic tools to see inside the body. Surgical techniques to repair abdominal injuries and antibiotics to fight infection. They could only watch him die. The palace on the Palatine Hill where this happened still stands in ruins 2,000 years later. Tourists walk through spaces where Claudius once lived, where he ruled, where he died. The marble that absorbed his blood and urine has long since been replaced or weathered to dust. But the story remains. Because Claudius's death touches something universal, the fragility of dignity. The vulnerability of all bodies, regardless of power. The arbitrary cruelty of how we're remembered. He spent his life fighting mockery, proving capability despite disability, achieving remarkable things, and it was all undone in 12 hours. The most powerful person in the known world, commander of legions, ruler of territories from Britannia to Egypt, couldn't stop his own bladder from tearing apart. All his authority, all his guards, all the wealth of Rome, none of it mattered. In that moment, he was just flesh, subject to the same failures and indignities as any other human. Just more visible, more remembered. History preserved what Claudius would have most wanted forgotten. But perhaps there's strange justice in that. Because remembering how he died forces us to remember how he lived, not as some distant marble emperor, but as a human being who suffered, persevered, and achieved despite impossible obstacles. His humiliation is part of his humanity, and his humanity, ultimately, is what makes him unforgettable. The throne room where it happened was cleaned, used again, witnessed 1,000 other sessions. But the people who were there that day carried the memory forever. What they saw wasn't just an emperor dying. It was the truth beneath all power, that we are all, always, just flesh that can fail us. That dignity is a performance we maintain until our bodies refuse to cooperate. That the distance between authority and agony is just one moment, one rupture, one failure we cannot control. Claudius died as he lived trapped in a body that betrayed him, fighting for dignity in a world that measured worth by physical perfection. The tragedy isn't just that he died humiliated, it's that he had to fight so hard to be taken seriously in the first place. And that fight, more than the manner of his death, is what deserves to be remembered.